Ritual, Power, Healing, and Community. Part 3. The Dimensions of Ritual. In tribal communities, such as the Dagara, there are several dimensions to ritual. There is communal ritual, where every grown-up member of the village is obliged to attend. These gatherings take care of the village's need to reaffirm its unity under one spirit, be it Tigin, the earth shrine, Dawara, the nature shrine, or Namwin, the supreme god. There is family ritual, which can be a subcommunity honoring of certain spirits in the name of family unity or for other reasons. It is community ritual that allows these isolated semi-private family rituals to work effectively. Family rituals are performed under the guidance of the family head and in the presence of every responsible family member. Any initiated person is considered responsible and must attend family rituals. From the family rituals, and in a way, from community rituals, there are derived individual rituals. My father's failure in honoring of the earth shrine is an example of individual ritual that had effect on more than just the individual. It eventually affected the family and the community. Individual rituals are just as important as family rituals and community rituals. This means that these rituals are interdependent, even though they look separate. Likewise, a ritual performed by a community liberates a certain energy that makes it possible for other rites to happen at a family and individualistic level. These ritualistic hierarchies are not designed at random. When the yearly village rituals are not performed, other rituals suffer with ineffectiveness. 10 years ago, the whole village suffered drought because the priest of the earth shrine had passed away, leaving his first son to carry on the priestly tradition. But this son either forgot or refused to perform this fundamental rite. It should be noted that the priest of the earth shrine is usually seen as a collective person. Whatever he does, alone or in the presence of the village, is considered communal. So if he fails to do anything, the community suffers. Families gathered to carry on with their family rituals and individuals complied with individual ritual, but disaster resulted anyway. Many died in the drought, including the new priest of the earth shrine. Individual duty and ritual cannot take the place of communal duty and vice versa. My grandfather could not perform the ritual that my father owed to the earth shrine because his task was to take care of the family rituals in order to render individual rituals possible. We all owe to the cosmic order, and it is impossible at this level to do for others what others are expected to do for themselves. We owe to the cosmic order because we are individually and communally responsible for its maintenance. Every person is sent to this outpost called Earth to work on a project that is intended to keep this cosmic order healthy. Any person that fails to do what he or she must do energetically stains the cosmic order. It may be too soon to say that the ills of American culture come from a situation similar to that which led to the death of my stepbrother or the famine 10 years ago. But I am tempted to think that when the focus of everyday living displaces ritual in a given society, social decay begins to work from the inside out. The fading and disappearance of ritual in modern culture is, from the viewpoint of the Dagara, expressed in several ways. The weakening of links with the spirit world and general alienation of people from themselves and others. In a context like this, there are no elders to help anyone remember through initiation of his or her important place in the community. Those who seek to remember have an attraction toward violence. They live their life constantly upset or angry, and those responsible for them are at a loss as to what to do. For an African who comes to America, there are no words to describe the shock he encounters. At first blush, this culture shows itself as heaven somewhere away from the planet, but there is still connection to the planet in a left-handed way. Americans are spoiled every which way to the point where they behave as if no one else on the planet can possibly be hungry or unsheltered or without a television set or a telephone. Incredibly, I find that they are even aware that they are the only people in this whole world to enjoy the privilege of waste and squandery. If an American isn't expressing pity for a person who doesn't have a television or telephone, he's expressing excitement at the thought of how enjoyable it would be to witness a tribesman being introduced to these modern gadgets. Sometimes they even expect the rest of the world still to be walking naked, sheltered in huts and eating lizards and worms. I remember once being asked by an American, "Does everyone in your country still sleep in trees?" And I replied, "Yes." He was overjoyed, or at least seemed so at meeting someone who had slept in a tree. But when I added that in our capital city of Ouagadougou, the ambassador of the United States sleeps in the tallest tree, he walked away confused and a bit suspicious. Americans are bred to expect the rest of the world to be underdeveloped. The Dagara people, on the other hand, are suspicious of abundance. It translates into a cultural attitude that a person of abundance is a person too worldly to deal with hardship. This is an obvious trick from a god to put someone to sleep before the final blow. In my village, there was a man whom everyone knew to be very poor, or at least he did not have anything that anyone would desire. His compound was as normal as anyone else's. He was married with several children. But one day the man began to act most strangely. First, there was delivery of a half-dozen cows from nearby Ghana by someone no one knew of. The man soon began to build a modern home and bought himself a brand new English bicycle. He wore clean clothes. He had changed in ways that were suspicious, and he showed abundance in ways that insulted the entire setup of the tribe. People waited for the inevitable. It occurred quickly. The man's oldest son died mysteriously. He was drowned in the shallow waters of the river. It did not take long before one of his daughters passed away while asleep. But this was not the worst. He killed his wife accidentally by letting a beam fall on her. Very soon the man became a maniac, stealing from people things he did not even need, such as food and dirty clothes. People he stole from knew what he did, but never indicted him. His own end came when he self-destructed. The only place where abundance is warranted is in nature. A person who wastes is a person who insults the gods. In light of the waste encountered in the modern world, one wonders if anyone knows that there is a world outside of this abundance where people are aware of priorities other than materialism. The greatest shock that American culture has on traditional people is its notion of speed. My role in our village is to be a translator to my elders of modern culture and a translator to modern culture of my people's ways. I remember a social moment spent around millet beer where I began to speak about the notion of motion. Millet beer is brewed by women. First, millet is germinated and dried in the sun. Then it is ground and boiled heavily to extract the juice. This juice is boiled again for a whole day to ensure its fermentation, then cooled to ambient temperature. By the time it is fermented, the entire process has taken about 3 days. It is around the calabash of this beer that people socialize. As they say in the village, one drinks his way to interesting talk, or the spirit of millet beer is generous in words. In the conversation, I pointed to a circle of old people who were sitting around enjoying the day and explained that such stillness would be a shock to a person in the West, whose schedule is much faster. One of the elders asked, "Where do these white people run to every morning?" "To their workplaces, of course." "Why do they have to run to something that is not running away from them?" "They do not have time." I had to say this word in French because there is no equivalent in the local language. The conversation came to a halt when the elder had to ask what this time was. Among the Dagara, the absence of time generates a mode of life whose focus is on the state of one's spirit. This is not comparable to what machine-dominated culture is all about. While in America, the newcomer thinks at first that people move hurriedly in order to enjoy the thrill of speed. But a more traditional look at motion, at speed, quickly reveals that speed is not necessarily so much a movement towards something as it is a movement away from something. The elder who noticed that moderns don't have to run towards something that isn't moving was pointing to the idea that to move is also to keep oneself distracted. The indigenous mind cannot conceive of it otherwise. And so the elder sees those in constant motion going places, doing things, making noise as moving away from something that they do not want to look at, or moving away from something that others do not want them to look at. When you slow down, you begin to discover that there is a silent awareness of what it is that you do not want to look at. The anger of nature within each of us, the anger of the gods, the anger of the ancestors or the spirit world. In his book, The Africans, Ali Mazrui began his study of the triple heritage of the African people by pointing out that the ills of the continent of Africa nowadays are the result of the anger of the ancestors in the face of the general desecration brought about by modernism. He indicates that throwing away one's culture for another is an insult to the dead and can result, as in the case of Africa, in a lot of unresolved ills. In a way, Mr. Mazrui is not just speaking about mechanized Africa, where the worship of the ancestors is being gradually replaced with the worship of machines. He is also speaking to the developed countries where the ant-like frenzy of life, characterized by a work-obsessed culture, is symptomatic of an illness that is perhaps too large to face. Thus, speed is a way to prevent ourselves from having to deal with something we do not want to face. So we run from these symptoms and their sources that are not nice to look at. To be able to face our fears, we must remember how to perform ritual. To remember how to perform ritual, we must slow down. I believe that the difference between the indigenous world and the industrial world has mostly to do with speed, not about whether one world needs to have ritual and the other doesn't. In light of what I said earlier, it appears that the indigenous world looks while the industrial world overlooks. Indigenous people are indigenous because there are no machines between them and their gods. There are no machines barring the door to the spirit world where one can enter in and listen to what is going on within at a deep level, participating in the vibration of nature. Where machines speak in place of gods, people are hard put to listen, even more hard put to vibrate with the realm of nature. Thus, the two worlds of the traditional and the industrial are diametrically opposed. The indigenous world, in trying to emulate nature, espouses a walk with life, a slow, quiet day-to-day kind of existence. The modern world, on the other hand, steams through life like a locomotive, controlled by a certain sense of careless waste and destruction. Such life eats at the psyche and moves its victims faster and faster along, as they are progressively emptied out of their spiritual and psychic fuel. It is here, consequently, where one's spirit is in crisis, that speed is the yardstick by which the crisis itself is expressed. And a person in modern culture who is aware of this destruction from the machine world upon the spiritual world of the individual realizes that there is a starvation of the soul, and realizing that, he or she starts to wonder what to do about it. In places that I have been to speak to people about the beliefs and realities of the indigenous world, there has been a consistent number of people who have been so touched, even profoundly shaken by what I was telling them, that I have to believe that I was not so much appealing to their minds as I was awakening something within their souls, something that has always been there. This tells me that there must be an indigenous person within each of us. This indigenous archetype within the modern soul is an archetype that is in serious need of acknowledgement within the person. A different set of priorities dwells there, a set of priorities long forgotten in higher cultures. People in touch with this archetype are in search of caring, for their spirit seeks to transcend the stress placed on the body and the mind by the rapid motion of everyday life around them. Such people would not be ashamed to express their hunger for transcendence. These are the kind of people in need of ritual. Ritual, the anti-machine. Ritual, in a way, is an anti-machine, even though the industrial world is not totally devoid of the practice of ritual. David Kurtzer, in Ritual, Politics, and Power, points out it is innately inscribed within humans to do ritual. He goes on to show that ritual exists in every aspect of political practice where the construction of power is ordered by symbol and ceremony. For him, ritual is unavoidable in modern political and social interplay because it is something that enables people to deal with archetypes. There is some truth in such a vision, but I think that the term is being manipulated to fit certain urges for legitimization. A spirit can be used to legitimize someone's desires. For example, someone can say that a spirit told him or her to do something, which legitimizes his or her unwarranted action, as in the American comedy line, "The devil made me do it." One can claim divine sponsorship to justify actions that have nothing to do with the divine. One has only to look at American televangelism for that. It is not possible, similarly, to associate the hasty, grinding wheels of the machine culture as the echoes or soundings of ritual. Ritual is not compatible with the rapid rhythm that industrialism has injected into life. So whenever ritual happens in a place commanded by or dominated by a machine, ritual becomes a statement against the very rhythm that feeds the needs of that machine. It makes no difference whether it is a political machine or otherwise. I say this because it feels to me that this elusive sense of the divine in the modern world and the practice of blatant consumerism have spread even into the spiritual realm. This reveals the attempt of a mechanized culture to protect itself from having to face even subtle duties toward its higher self. To say that ritual is needed in the industrialized world is an understatement. We have seen in my own people that it is probably impossible to live a sane life without it. In the face of the sweeping industrial imperialism wrought upon the continent of Africa by Europeans, the traditional African in general, and the Dagara in particular, have been unable to conceive of a way to respond to the attractiveness of the machine-like world without abandoning their ancestral ways. Progress brings a different world into the already existing world of the indigenous person. In Africa, whoever gets touched by progress is superficially in two worlds, the traditional and the corporate. The corporate world dims the light of the traditional world by exerting a powerful magnetic shadow-like pull on the psyche of the individual. Thus, the individual feels compelled to respond. But as he or she tries to respond, the individual begins to realize that the source of the pull is elusive. For the machine world either refuses to provide a sense of complete satiation, or it just doesn't have it to provide. And yet the machine world cannot let go of the individual, or else the machine will cease its motion in spite of the fact that it cannot fully provide for the individual's needs. So one of the ways to maintain a certain sense of self is to remain somewhat linked to essential traditionalism. This is made apparent every time there is a death in one of our cities. The immediate instinct is to carry the body back to the village in order that a proper mourning ritual can happen. People of the same village within the city will gather to prepare whatever is needed for the journey back home. They bring the funeral home, as they say nowadays. These kinds of funerals account for 10% of all the funerals celebrated in the villages. The city dweller in Africa who works for a company does so to meet his basic needs as a human being. His adherence to a machine culture does not have the power to disconnect him fully from the roots of his ancestry. Very few sever themselves from home. Periodic adherence to prescribed rituals while dwelling in this industrialized culture is the medicine with which to dress the wounds and repair the deformities brought on by the might of progress. The modern seeker of ritual primarily acknowledges that he or she is wounded or hollowed out or emptied of his or her vital substance to the point that the individual is almost disgusted with the present state of his or her life. These wounds are evidence of the need to enter into a special creative process. They are the language with which entry into the realm of ritual is possible. As long as one does not deploy special energy to repress and deny these wounds, but rather contains them creatively, that is, in ritual, then one is working on oneself as a potential survivor of the Holocaust and the tyranny of progress. I mean to say that the hurt that a person feels in the midst of this modern culture should be taken as a language spoken to himself or herself by the body. And the meaning of such a language is found in doing something about the part of oneself that is not acknowledged. Pain and ritual. Human senses are devices of communication. Sight is a language, as are pain, touch, smell, and taste. The most powerful among them is the feeling of pain. For the Daguerre elder, pain is the result of a resistance to something new, something toward which an old dispensation is at odds. We are made of layers of situations or experiences. Each one of them likes to use a specific part of ourselves in which to lodge. It's like a territory. A new experience that does not have a space to sit in within us will have to kick an old one out. The old one that does not want to leave will resist the new one, and the result is registered by us as pain. This is why the elders call it chuo. It means invasion, hunting, meeting with a violent edge. It also means boundary. Pain, therefore, is our body complaining about an intruder. Body complaint is understood as the soul's language relayed to us. A person in pain is being spoken to by that part of himself that knows only how to communicate in this way. Thus, when an initiated member of the community registers communication through pain, it is a signal that the soul is in need of some communion with its spiritual counterpart. In other words, the soul is moving old furniture out and bringing in new furniture. Whether that eventually works out well is another question. We do not always allow ourselves to work through pain. More often than not, we think pain is a signal that we must stop, rather than find its source. Our souls do not like stagnation. Our souls aspire toward growth, that is, toward remembering all that we have forgotten due to our trip to this place, the earth. In this context, a body in pain is a soul in longing. To shut down the pain is to override the call of the soul. When this happens, it is a repressive measure taken against oneself, which has somber consequences. Is it possible then to say that pain is good, primarily because it is a call to growth? The Daguerre elders would say yes. They believe that a person who has suffered is a person who has heard pain. The person hears the pain as a creative action, connecting that person with his or her highest self, which prescribes an alternative to spiritual death. So pain at least teaches us something. It is commotion, emotion, and a call for a rebirth. It teaches that one must return to a mode of living that began with life itself. And it draws from nature and the cosmos life essence that seeks to align itself with the existing powers. Such living is what ancient tribes have adopted for thousands of years, and its success can be seen in the fact that in it, there is room for the entire person to exist. This means that the world of progress, with its all-consuming tendencies, is an essentialist that feeds on anything that lives, turning the human into an indentured servant fed with things material, yet starved for everything else. In this context, ritual is this return to the ancient with a plea for help directed to the world of the spirit, the hidden space of ritual. Perhaps it was the long fast, perhaps it was the many days of darkness in the cave hidden away from what is seen, perhaps it was the constant silence. The boundary between this world and the spirit world began to blur. It was the time of my initiation. Out of the blackness came the voice of Giso. Malidoma, the time for remembering has come. What did Giso mean? Was he here, or was it my imagination? Was it flesh, or was it spirit? Is there any difference? I could not speak. It was not allowed. I wanted to reach out to my friend and mentor just to feel his presence, just to know that I was still alive. Giso, my thoughts begged. What is to be remembered? My ears heard nothing, but his voice responded. Go back to the beginning, Malidoma. Go back even to the beginning of beginnings. The beginning. The beginning. The beginning. Yes, I can hear grandfather's voice. All is warm and dark. The drumbeat of my mother's heart pounded with the steadiness of a trance dance. Little one, the time has come, while you are still in your cave of silence, to welcome you to the land of the living. The time has come to tell you what awaits you. A bumpy road awaits you, little one, but we are here to guide you on that road. It was the time of the fetal ritual hearing. People were gathered around Mother, who was now in a trance. Her brothers and grandfather were all there, as well as the officiating Baburo, the one who seeks the knowledge below shaman. The voice of the shaman now was asking, "Speak to us, child, who is to come." Speak. How could I speak? Why speak? The warmth and the silence of the womb allowed me to remain tied to the other world. To speak would be to touch the land of the living. Did I even want to do that? You must speak. You must answer my questions, child who is to come. The shaman's drum could now be heard. Its beat was growing louder than the drumbeat of my mother's heart. I was being lured, being pulled to the land of the living. The feelings, the energy of the living were rising within me, now too much to contain. I could be silent no longer. What is it you want to know? I heard myself say, but it was the voice of my mother that was speaking this. It was the voice that talked to me before her sleep time. How could she be speaking the same words as I? Grandfather's voice could be heard again. Even though he was a shaman priest of great repute, it was customary to have a Baburo officiate at the fetal ritual hearing. I know that you shall come to us as a man-child. Tell us why you have been sent, your purpose for visiting us. From the other world could be seen the purpose. It was like a painting made of light that had no speakable form. The vision had no message made of words. To look at it was to feel its meaning. I have come to walk with the enemy. I have come to wander in the house of the other, bringing the piece of water to the heat of yonder. I am to carry our name across the big sea. From the land of the Nipula white man, I shall carry the word of the Dagara. Gold shall flow with silver. East shall shake hands with West. To make an enemy a friend is to end the need for war, to vanquish the powers of destruction. The shaman's drum kept beating and beating its call to me. No other sound could be heard for a while. Grandfather spoke again. Hear me, child who is to come. I shall name you Malidoma, which means befriend with the enemy. We shall help prepare the way for you. We shall guide you on your journey. The shaman's drum ceased. As the vision faded, the silence of the cave brought sounds that only silence brings. Where was Giso? The voices of the ancestors seemed to chant, seemed to echo the approval of grandfather's decision. It is the right of the grandfather to tell the grandson later what was said while in the womb. It is the right of the grandfather to give the name that will serve as a life program to its bearer. Grandfather had always been my confidant and guide since the day I could walk. The first few years of a male child are usually spent with the grandfather, while the other family members go on with their family responsibilities. There is an unspoken closeness between one who has freshly entered from the other world and one who is close to returning to that other world. Grandfathers want to know as much as possible about the state of affairs on the other side before returning, and the children will slowly grow into forgetting the grandness of the realm he came from. Eventually, it is the role of the grandfather to direct the grandson to his father, thus creating a circle where a father-grandfather allows a son-grandson to be son to the father. Because of the intimacy between grandfather and grandson, the father tends to feel left out, and a kind of tension between the adult men develops, until the grandfather dies or the child grows into adolescence. Son and father do not have much of a learning exchange. The father does not have much to impart to the son because conversations between grandfathers and grandsons are like conversations of knowledge between brothers of a common group, that of the other world. To know is to be old. Thus, the father recognizes that he is presently too young to mess with this relationship between wise men grandfather and grandson. Initiation is the longest ritual one ever gets involved in within the village. In it, there are things that can be talked about between initiates and things that can be revealed to non-initiates. But there are several specifics about certain rites or secrets that can never be disclosed. To do so is not just forbidden, it can be lethal to the discloser. One reason is found in the sacred, hidden and silent space of ritual itself. It is there where things native to that space have no intention of being brought into the surface world, so they don't lose their power, or so they don't lose their ability to act the way they are expected or needed to act. It is like taking a fish out of water and expecting the fish to demonstrate its ability to swim. To prevent disclosure from occurring, the elders do something secretly to every initiate, so that divulging these secrets will make the initiates dizzy or suffocate or go numb. Language in itself does not create or provide a space in which the natural and the supernatural world can safely migrate into this world. Sometimes the words into which we want to put certain sacred spirits are a deadly virus to those very spirits. So, rather than let themselves be damaged by us, these spirits damage us instead. I will have a greater opportunity to dwell on this topic of the danger of human language when I speak about initiation of the elders. For the elder who is usually officiating, hiding the nature of his relationship with a spiritual force is the way to keep this relationship alive. The relationship draws more strength, more power, and even gets more momentum within its hiddenness. We call spirits into a circle of people in order to help achieve goals that cannot be achieved in any other way. This calling needs to remain in safe containment, the way a baby remains hidden prior to being born. Safe containment means keeping the space away from any impurities, any unwanted intrusions. I still remember the funeral of my stepbrother that I talked about in the beginning of this book. Why was grandfather insisting that everybody entering the ritual space be marked? This helped save the ritual space from being a grooming place for more evil happenings. The marking was for security reasons, but could have also been for reasons of secrecy. Even though funerals are obviously a public rite, the implication is that what you see is not what you get. What was contained in this funeral was a secret mechanism destined to produce a counterforce against that which triggered the death of my stepbrother. It worked. For the traditional person, hiddenness is effectiveness. Hiddenness is power. Disclosure or exhibition is threatening to the relationship between us and the spirits we invoke within ritual. Consequently, an outsider cannot be invited into a ritual already in progress unless that person is already in a ritual space of his own. This presupposes that every person you meet on the road has had a little ash and water ritual at home and has spoken to his own ancestors before starting the day. This is common in the traditional Dagro world. No one can expect such a thing in the modern world, so when not sure, better to avoid taking risks. Intrusion into a ritual space is a profaning of that ritual space and the spirits invoked. The spirit will become agitated and will react as though the intruder intends to rip it open. Spirits care about your having called them in without telling them that there are intruders who intend to rip them open. The profane is the allergy of the spirit. Within a ritual space, anything that is not sacred threatens to desecrate the hallowedness of what is happening. Consequently, it drives the spirit crazy, and he who is in charge of the ritual is in big trouble. But when the space is kept clean, ritual yields great power to those involved with it. Ritual as show. The problem with Western culture is that it is a show-off culture that intimidates. This is why it is generating so much death, loss, and displacement. To perform ritual for show is to generate some kind of death or loss. Concealment of ritual is an act of life preservation because it is only in its concealment that needs are met that cannot be met in any other way. If our goal is to repair all the damage done by the powers of progress, it becomes important to make sure that we focus on how to stay underground while attempting to reconnect with true ritual and true spirits. People in the West are just beginning to retrieve ritual from the pits of their ancestral consciousness. Most of the time, I see it coming out as fossilized debris that needs to be reinfused with life. Take, for example, grief ritual in America, which is performed at great cost using every decor imaginable. Such grief ritual induces the participants to focus on the pain of separation or digs out the repressed sorrow and sealed tears associated with the painful loss of loved ones. The focus here is not on ritual itself, but on opening up something in hearts and spirits that has been locked away so long that individuals can barely remember the source. I have witnessed funerals where wounded people in great need of healing through ritual are the ones actually planning and taking care of the funeral arrangements. These are people who need someone to help them in their own grief, who are burdened with creating ritual space for themselves as well as others. We are facing here some kind of flawed process of self-caretaking. Who can create ritual in its proper space and sequence when there are no elders? Who is there who remembers the old ways, the ancient ways, the ways of the heart, the ways of the spirit that reach to the depths of the soul in its grief? It is better not to do a ritual at all than to do one the wrong way. In the Dagara tribe, a failed ritual is repaired then and there because no one can stand to live with the damage of a ritual as it wreaks havoc on everything else in that person's surroundings. For example, with regard to the failed ritual I mentioned earlier, if we had postponed addressing the error immediately, it would have resulted in unfortunate physical damage that would have taken even more complicated ritual to repair. It takes a ritual to repair a failed ritual. It also takes the person directly responsible for the failure to right the wrong. Acknowledgement of error is not error. A person who sincerely tells the spirit that he did something wrong cannot be punished anymore. The wrong itself is its own punishment. Power on display. As humans, we are fascinated by supernatural, spiritual power. Every moment you display this kind of power to the world, that power isolates you. You become displaced by the power you display because that power is also displaced through you. For example, behind the mighty-looking corporations are a group of wealthy people whose personal lives are lived in marginality. To maintain the show of corporate power, they must give up something of themselves, their spirit. These people start to become invisible because they are mere instruments of the power being displayed, the power being made visible. They take a back seat to the corporation's need to be powerful. They then begin to lose touch with their own souls, with the world of the invisible. This is why they are marginal. The greatest needs ends up being expressed by these people and through these people. It is the action of those in power that produces the poor, the menial worker, the man and woman in debt, and the homeless. Misused power triggers its exact opposite, as if that opposite needed to be there to highlight the dysfunctionality of its creator. The menial worker, the man and woman in debt, the poor and the homeless exist as if they must to highlight the person in power. The person who displays this kind of power needs more help than those who are, more or less, the casualties of this power display. The power that is felt, entertained, nourished, and kept alive from within through ritual has a much different effect on a person who may be a victim of overt power. This kind of power is what many people in the West seek avidly, and in most cases, unsuccessfully. It is spiritual power, a power that is invisible, and yet whose presence can be felt in terms of gentleness, love, and compassion. A person who lives in constant touch with the invisible realm of incomparable power is always in a good temperament and very understanding of people and situations. He does not fall prey to retaliatory invitations and does not experience wide swings in mood. It is this kind of balance in a person that people in my village recognize as the presence of power in a person. This presence of power hides in a balanced person and speaks adequately enough about its aliveness. This hiddenness of power in a person is valued in my village because it speaks to life through its invisibility. This presence of power is not presence to the eye, but presence to the psyche. Whatever happens in a ritual space, some kind of power is released if given a freedom in which to live. This is the only way those who participate in the ritual can continue to benefit from the power. The forces aroused in the ritual function like a power plant into which every individual is hooked. When one leaves the ritual space, the power of the ritual goes wherever the person goes. Only in ritual can the here follow you to the there. The more ritualized our space, the more ritualized our lives. I am suggesting that a space, cultural space, or community space in which ritual is the yardstick by which life is measured puts the people living in it in a constant state of ritual energy that sanctifies their lives. A sacred life is a ritualized life, that is, one that draws constantly from the realm of the spiritual to handle even the smallest situation. Please stay tuned for part 4 of Ritual, Power, Healing, and Community. Peace, blessings, and much love to you all. On Earth, there was once a people who held the knowledge of the universe across space and time. They were the Israelites. Over time, their wisdom was scattered among all nations, with each taking a piece. In the end, this left them destitute. Now, listen to this profound wisdom passed down through great works, presented in your voice, from your own perspective, from the perspective of the Israelites themselves. For early access to chapters and full audiobooks, consider becoming a member. For just $10 per month, you can unlock exclusive access to this priceless wisdom, once stolen from our ancestors. Hear their voices through your own as you join us on this journey of discovery and reclamation.